This is one of my favorite films of all time. It is a landmark piece of comedy. I bust a gut just thinking about it.
I am a great magician. Your clothes are red!
Wow!
I bet the reviews are, what the Let's talk a little about Kung Pow, but also about film publicity, film critique, and comedic films as a whole. And thanks to the people who support this channel via Patreon. It means a lot to me, as it does to all independent creators. You know, it's never been harder to be a freelance creative, and folks like this are critical to all of us, so thank you. What do I love so much about Kung Pow? I love that it dared. This is a film by Steve Odekirk, who also worked on films like Bruce Almighty and the second Ace Ventura. He bought the rights to a 1976 Hong Kong action film called Tiger and Crane Fists, aka Savage Killers, and then laboriously digitized the old film. He then built and lit sets to match the film and shot footage of himself and other actors to mix into the story.
I must apologize for Wimp Lo. He is an idiot. We have purposely trained him wrong, as a joke.
If you've got an ass, I'll kick it!
It is an absolutely bonkers way to make a film, and in my view, it not only works, but slays. It's kind of like the Lonely Island rap albums in that they're sort of making fun of a style of art, but it works because it's clear that they love that style of art. They're teasing it as an admirer, not as a bully. Kung Pow is so silly, but it also commits to the lines it draws. For example, if they decide at some point that a character makes a silly noise as she's talking,
You've got what you wanted. Now go!
her dad must also make that same noise.
Who are you? Ling's father.
It's so goddamn good. So why are the reviews so shit? Well, let me tell you about something that happened in my film career. When I finished my first film and it got accepted for distribution, there was only one other person on the team besides me, the sales agent. I asked him what he'd seen other filmmakers do to make their films launch as big a success as possible. The advice amounted to hiring a publicist, which I couldn't afford to do, so the conversation kind of petered out. But he mentioned that he'd also heard it was possible to buy favorable reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, so that when the film came out, it would be certified fresh. Now, the person telling me about this was not involved in the doing of it at all. He just said that he'd heard it was possible, and if I wanted to do it, I could probably find people to help. The idea was I would pay a bunch of money to someone in film publicity, and then those people would take my film out to reviewers, and then the reviewers would publish only good reviews where Rotten Tomatoes could see them. If the numbers worked in my favor, and I was cautioned that there was no ironclad guarantee that they would work in my favor, my film would carry the certified fresh badge. That badge is valuable because some streamers display it right on the film's key art page, which one assumes helps people take a chance on an unknown filmmaker like myself. Plus, it would be a bragging point that I could use in conversations about my film. Okay, quick sidetrack here. Let's take note of one thing that the New York Times bestseller list does. If they suspect you of gaming the system, your listing gets a dagger. So if you release a book, and then a corporation or political party friendly to you, or possibly owned by you, buys hundreds of thousands of copies of that book to inflate sales numbers, the New York Times will add a dagger to your entry on the list. The dagger means that going by sales, this book has sold enough to be here, but retailers are saying that someone who looks a little like the author is showing up with what looks like a fake mustache and buying many thousands of copies of their own book to inflate sales numbers. Rotten Tomatoes doesn't use a dagger or anything similar, so a legitimately earned certified fresh badge would be worth just as my ill-gotten one had I got one. I chose not to pursue the idea for fundamental reasons. I couldn't afford it. Look, I'm not a businessman, I'm an artist. If I had the money to promote a film, I would spend it making a different film, and I expect all of you to do the same. Between having that conversation in the middle of 2023 and my film's release in November of 2023, Vulture published this article in which they talk more in depth about how bad the Rotten Tomatoes situation is, including the fact that they are now owned by a movie studio and a movie tickets app, which seems, to me, like a little bit of a conflict. So, yeah, it looks like Rotten Tomatoes reviews are potentially for sale and potentially conflicted from the jump. At the same time, Kung Pow Enter the Fist is, to me, just about a perfect comedy movie, and Rotten Tomatoes critics thoroughly shit on it. How can this be? Now, I understand artificially inflated reviews, that's just techno-feudalist and shitification, but why the hate? The audience seems to like it. 69% of 50,000 people do anyway. That ain't teabag. I decided to look at the reviews of the top tomato critics to try to get some sense of consensus. Many of the reviews included allusions to Asian food dishes, which seemed a little weird to me. And something else I noticed is a couple of the critics referenced other movies in their review of Kung Pow. This one was written by Lawrence Van Gelder for the New York Times. To imagine the life of Harry Potter as a martial arts adventure told by a lobotomized Woody Allen is to have some idea of the fate that lies in store for moviegoers lured to the mediocrity that is Kung Pow Enter the Fist. I would love to speak to Mr. Van Gelder now to see whether he still has that opinion, but he passed away in 2016. May he rest in peace. He was 83 years old and he fell to cancer. We have to take this man seriously. He was a successful New York journalist who rose to prominent positions at some of the most well-regarded publications in the world. In order to do those things in his time, he must have wielded words carefully and with great skill, even if, in this case, with utmost respect to his work and his legacy, I think he was talking shit. Harry Potter came out in November of 2001, a few months before Kung Pow, and it was, of course, a gigantic smash. And you can see why that title would have been fresh in the mind of a man who was, at the time, the arts and leisure editor of the New York Times. Nothing about Kung Pow makes me think Woody Allen. Again, with utmost respect to Mr. Van Gelder, I don't know what to make of this review, and it's not helping me understand the critics' rage at Kung Pow. Let's try another. This review by Robert K. Elder references another film. Not since Freddy Got Fingered has a major release been so painful to sit through. Let's see how Freddy Got Fingered fared with the tomatoes. Even worse, but 56% of the audience liked it. So I went to the Freddy Got Fingered top critics reviews, and there I saw this review that references Joe Dirt. So I looked at Joe Dirt's reviews. 9% critics, 63% regular people. With respect to the teams that worked on Freddy Got Fingered and Joe Dirt, I don't think they're in the same league as Kung Pow. They're traditionally shot narrative comedies. Kung Pow is the movie version of a remix, and it was done, for the most part, working with 35mm film, not all digital as it would be today. Freddy Got Fingered's reviews seem to center around the fact that it was an experiment in which Tom Green purposely wasted a major movie studio's money. Honestly, I don't doubt that Tom Green would do something like that and it would be hilarious, but I don't think he did. To listen to Tom Green talk about what happened, he wanted to make a movie that was disgusting and off-putting, but the studio made him change parts of the film because focus groups found certain parts of it disgusting and off-putting.
I give that a 1 on 10. It was disgusting. I'm thinking like I'm in the back of the room going, you idiot, that's a 10 on 10. It's disgusting.
You can see how those conflicting purposes are going to make a compromised result. I don't know what to say about Joe Dirt. Yeah, it's dumb.
You know what? I don't mind being hit with a few hot dogs. It's all enough with the hot dog!
But if that was all it had to offer, people would have forgotten it by now.
I freely admit it wasn't a huge hit. There was bigger hits out there I did, but just to have one stay in the world for all this time, and number one thing I get asked about.
Spade says that Joe Dirt is the number one thing people ask him about, which I believe, because his website has a Joe Dirt vibe and sells Joe Dirt merch. So if these movies all have enduring fan bases, which they do, why did critics shit on them so thoroughly? There's not really an answer, but I made a list anyway. They're going into the viewing of every movie ready to deconstruct it. Comedy kinda needs you to be looking to have fun, not looking to deconstruct. Only an idiot would start a YouTube channel designed to deconstruct comedy, right? I think that critics spend their lives in reverence of the loftiest ideal of film, and comedies necessarily poke fun at themselves and at film as a whole. If critics approved of that, they'd effectively be agreeing that their own positions are silly. I think it's kind of like how I'm never going to be able to critique crowd work because I don't really care about it. I see it as a kind of party trick. Maybe film critics see Kung Pow the way I see crowd work, which is to say, to them, it doesn't rise to the level of what they consider the art to be. Which brings me neatly to There's too wide a gulf in film for anyone to be able to critique it all. Imagine asking someone to be able to critique everything from ballet to breakdancing. There's not time enough in a lifetime to fully understand either, let alone both. And I think someone who wants to be a film critic is spending more time considering the equivalent of Baryshnikov than the B-Boys. I don't think it's possible to accurately critique Schindler's List and Kung Pow. Kung Pow is inarguably silly, but it also stands alone in the way it was made and the jokes it delivers. If you've not seen it, give it a look. If you've seen it before, I think it deserves a second watch. Take a look, watch it again. What do you think? It's great, right?
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe, and maybe jump on the Patreon if you want to help me make more. And if you want to talk about comedy writing with people who are trying to do it in a constructive way, we also have a Discord channel.